The Corn Maze. In Maplebridge, this year's Delta Sigma Phi initiation wasn't for the faint-hearted. Freshmen were told they had to spend the night in Farmer Giles' haunted corn maze. The Giles pumpkin patch had opened for the first time the year before, and after a group of frat bros got the pants scared off them, spooky rumors began to circle that the corn maze was actually dangerous. Freshmen Rob and Jamie accepted this year's challenge eagerly. They had wanted to join Delta Sigma Phi since they both got into the same school. So, they agreed that they would do whatever it took to complete their initiation. After Farmer Giles locked up, the duo waited for him to leave before sneaking over, carefully stepping over pumpkins and vines. To the maze was guarded by a smiling scarecrow. It had a twisted grin that stretched across its face, in uneven stitches, and glassy button eyes that were two different sizes. Next to the scarecrow, a rusty sign read, "Enter at your own risk." Rob gave the scarecrow a high five to the face before heading inside the maze. Jamie rolled his eyes and followed. At first, Rob and Jamie laughed off the rumors, playfully trying to scare one another throughout the beginning of the night. But as the darkness deepened, the atmosphere changed, the boys grew quieter, the air grew colder, and a repeated rustling kept causing them to have to stop and listen. Each time they turned around, the smiling scarecrow from the entrance appeared to be a little bit closer. Panic set in. Jamie frantically whispered, "Rob, I swear that scarecrow was on the other side of the maze when we started." Rob tried to rationalize. Maybe there are multiple scarecrows? The boys quickened their pace, and the rustling grew louder. Their flashlights, once strong beams cutting through the darkness, started to flicker and dim, but the scarecrow's grin seemed all the more illuminated. Every path they took, every turn they made, led them right back to the haunting figure. At one point, Rob rounded a corner ahead of Jamie, and by the time Jamie took the turn, Rob was nowhere to be seen. "Rob?" Jamie's voice echoed as he realized they were separated. He heard a faint noise of reply, but couldn't tell the direction it came from. Meanwhile, Rob, feeling equally lost, tried retracing his steps. But every path led him not to the exit or Jamie, but to the scarecrow. Its stitched smile, he swore, grew with every encounter. Eventually, Jamie turned a corner and saw the exit. Relief washed over him. But where was Rob? Jamie rushed out of the maze and waited for hours until daylight broke, and Rob still wasn't out of the maze. Police and the entire fraternity searched the maze, but they never found Rob. The only sign of him they found was when Jamie noticed something. The scarecrow was now wearing Rob's bloody shirt. The fading. Amidst a tapestry of vibrant reds and oranges, Fallowfield shone brightest during autumn. The town was known for its annual harvest festival, where the scents of pumpkin pies, cinnamon, and wood smoke filled the air. But in recent years, the festival became overshadowed by rumors of a chilling phenomenon locals referred to as the fading. Julia returned to Fallowfield after hearing that her grandmother had passed. She didn't put much stock into the rumors, but Julia was an investigative reporter. If there was any sort of truth to what was being reported by the locals, she was going to find out. Julia remembered her childhood days in Fallowfield when streets buzzed with tourists. She had come to expect the scent of freshly baked pies wafting through the air, and children running around laughing, with leaves crunching underfoot. But now, returning after years, Julia was shocked at how desolate the town was. The streets and sidewalks were empty, and it seemed that almost every other building had a for sale sign up. Julia met with Alex, her childhood friend, outside the local diner. Alex looked older and thinner, and her skin was so pale she was almost translucent. "It's the fading," she murmured, drawing Julia into a bony hug. Julia stiffened, but wrapped her arms around her friend as she said, "Please, tell me you don't actually believe in that nonsense. You need to see a doctor." Alex sighed. "I've seen a doctor, Julia. We all have. People have been changing. They lose their color, becoming almost ghostly, and then they just vanish. Only a faint shadow of their silhouette remains, burned into the ground where they last stood." Julia was concerned for her friend in the town, though she still wasn't sure what was going on. After dealing with the funeral arrangements for her grandmother, she took a trip to the city hall basement to have a look at the town archives. As she dug deeply into the stacks of newspapers and town logs, she found tales of an ancient spirit known as the Keeper. Long ago, the Keeper was revered and honored during the harvest festival, with songs and offerings. But as the local church took over the festival, its roots were forgotten, though the town continued to benefit from the bountiful harvests. Julia found references to rituals that used to be performed to please the keeper. She shared her findings with Alex. "We have to bring back the ritual," Alex insisted. Julia wasn't sure, but seeing the glint of determination in her sickly friend's eye, she agreed. That evening, Julia, Alex, and some of the remaining townsfolk got together to perform the old rituals. The soft playing of instruments began, while elders recounted tales, their voices a soothing balm against the chilly night. Children, their fingers stained with vibrant paints, drew symbols on stone paths. Julia couldn't be sure if the air shimmered with the presence of the keeper, or if it was merely the haze from the bonfires. But by dawn, Fallowfield felt changed. Alex looked healthier, her skin regaining some of its lost color. Julia took Alex to a doctor out of town, just to be safe. But by the time they arrived at the doctor's office, she was perfectly healthy. Julia penned an article on the mysterious fading of Fallowfield. Her piece captured national attention, bringing tourism to the town and landing Julia a permanent job. People debated if the fading was a mass hallucination or a warning to those who reap the benefits of harvest spirits while rejecting the old traditions. As for Fallowfield, tourists began to pour in, eager to witness the town's mysterious rituals firsthand. The once desolate streets buzzed with life again, and for sale signs disappeared from windows, replaced by thriving businesses and bustling cafes. The keeper, some said, never really left. It simply watched from the shadows, ensuring its rituals were never forgotten. Mrs. Maple's secret recipe. Sarah Maple loved to bake. Every autumn, as the leaves turned golden and the air became crisp, she would make a countless amount of pies and pastries for local bake sales in the county fair. Sometimes she'd even set a warm apple pie on the windowsill just for her neighbors in Orchard Hollow to enjoy. But she had a secret that she hid behind closed doors and long-sleeved blouses. Sarah had an abusive husband. Every night, after he drank too much, he'd unleash his fury on her. But Sarah had an escape in baking, a respite from her tormented life. If she kept busy in the kitchen, her husband was more likely to leave her alone. One particularly dreadful evening, as Sarah peeled apples for her pie, her husband went too far. In a fit of rage, he attacked her. Sarah defended herself, unintentionally stabbing and killing him with her peeling knife. Panicked, she did the only thing she could think of to hide her crime. She buried him in her small apple orchard out back. That year, her apple trees bore the most vibrant red apples Sarah had ever seen. Townsfolk remarked how she was making her best pies yet, completely unaware of the secret ingredient buried beneath the trees. Over the years, Mrs. Maple's apple pies became a town staple. Sarah's pies took center stage at every gathering, and people would travel miles to get a taste of her delectable crimson crust. Sarah became convinced that her husband's remains were the secret ingredient to the unparalleled taste. And while guilt gnawed at her, her adoration and fame her pies brought were intoxicating. She began to think, if one body could produce such delightful fruit, what could more do? She soon set her sights on Orchard Hollow's bachelors, particularly those with unsavory reputations. One by one, the town's most notorious men began to disappear, and with each new harvest, Sarah's orchard seemed to flourish. Deep crimson apples, almost glowing in their vibrancy, hung heavily from the boughs of her trees. However, as the years went by, whispers began to fill the town. Mrs. Thompson, the town gossip, once remarked, "Every year there's one less rogue in town, and one more delicious pie on Mrs. Maple's windowsill." Still, her pies remained one of the town's most anticipated treats. One day, a teenager named Leaf snuck into the orchard, hoping to snatch a few of Mrs. Maple's famous apples. But as they stumbled upon a patch of freshly turned earth, their curiosity led them to a grisly discovery. The town was in shock. Mrs. Maple, their beloved pie maker, was arrested. Many refused to believe that the pies they had so enjoyed were a product of such macabre circumstances. But as more and more remains were found beneath the orchard, it was confirmed that Sarah had indeed been using her dead husbands as fertilizer. Years later, Mrs. Maple passed away in prison, and a new rumor took hold. Some say that on cold autumn nights, a shadowy figure can be seen wandering the orchard, tending to the trees, forever ensuring that Mrs. Maple's legacy lives on in every forbidden bite.